Hello and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast with your host, metaphysician, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week, we will discover teachings, tips, and tools to radiate your best life ever with practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate?
Hello and welcome back to the Radiate Wellness Podcast, where today we radiate serenity with Patricia Saunders, who is the author of Creating a Happy World, Cultivating Happiness through the Transcendental Meditation Program. So welcome, Patricia. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, and thank you, Christy. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm really excited to be on your program.
Well, thank you. I understand that you are an assistant professor, an associate professor at the Maharishi University in Fairfield, Iowa.
Yes, I am. Assistant professor is my official title. And I've been teaching actually at Maharishi International University for coming up to 5 years, I think. And I love every moment of it.
Yes. And I can tell by your accent that you're not a native of.
I'm becoming a Native American. I've been in the US now for 17 years. And I came on a long meditation course, which I really wanted to do. And then I went to Maharishi International University to get my MA and my PhD. And then I married an American, and that's how it's been. So I'm very happily settled here. And I love America. I love Americans. I love everything about America.
Wonderful. Well, we're happy to have you. And where are you from originally?
From the UK, and I was born and raised in a county a little to the north of London. So I've been in and out of London, certainly for the first part of my life. And yeah, I mean, I love the UK too, but somehow I wanted a more spiritual direction. And somehow Fairfield, where I'm living, Maharishi International University, that gave me that spiritual direction. And I knew that was what I wanted and where I wanted to be. And nature just supported me. I mean, life supported me. Everything was made so easy to get here and, to be able to study at the university. And then I met my lovely husband. And so it went on. And now I'm here and America is stuck with me.
Well, as I said, we're glad to have you. Of course, you wrote this book about transcendental meditation. You're in consciousness studies at the Maharishi University. Have you always been in this field? How did you get interested in it?
Well, I trained as a classical musician, classical pianist, actually. I mean, I somehow envisaged I would become a concert pianist, I would teach music and so on. But the stress of it all was getting too much for me. I found it very, very difficult to cope with the long hours of practice and teaching and so on. And actually, I was in my dentist's parking lot back in the UK, and she had organized an introductory talk into Transcendental Meditation. And I was just talking to her. I just somehow met her. I was talking to her, and she encouraged me to come along. And I went, and I've never looked back. I couldn't wait to learn. I learned and then became a teacher of TM, Transcendental Meditation. And that's how it's been. So I've been very fortunate, I think, with a lot of things in my life. And I've had so much support.
Right. Actually, I consider playing music, especially classical music, but any kind of music, as rather meditative.
Yes, I think it is. I mean, I like the best of any genre. And I mean, you can listen to beautiful music and it's so serene, it's so calming to the physiology and to the mind. You just settle down, one just really transcends through the music. So I think in a way, I was a natural customer for learning a meditation technique because I was already halfway there with music.
And so for those who are not familiar with TM, Transcendental Meditation, how is it set apart from other forms of meditation?
That's actually an extremely good question because I think most meditations fall into 3 different categories. They're not all the same. They don't all have the same results. By that, I mean that they may affect different things. I mean, some forms of meditation may give one a better sense of who they are, where they're going, a better direction in life, help people to be more non-judgmental. I think mindful meditation is an example of that. Transcendental meditation is different to that because it's a technique whereby we allow the mind to settle down through finer and finer levels of thinking until the mind goes beyond the level of thinking, beyond the level of thinking, feeling. We literally transcend our everyday relative world. And we experience a state of pure consciousness. We experience the transcendent, which is really at the basis of everything in our world. And when we transcend all activity of the mind and we experience the transcendent, then we experience peace and happiness. And it's an experience way beyond the mind and senses. It's just huge. It's fantastic. I can see you smiling, Christy, so I'm guessing that you've had that experience.
Yes, these moments where you do feel out of yourself and you do feel above all of your issues and your problems. Now, this is fascinating. So, what do you think the connection is between this transcendence, meditation, and happiness? What is the connection? How does the one affect the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, when we transcend, when we experience the transcendent, we're experiencing a fourth state of consciousness. It's a state of infinite peace, infinite bliss, infinite happiness. Happiness really can be defined as a reflection of that bliss. And when we come out of that state, then we bring a little bit of that happiness and that peace with us. And, we go about our daily activity, whatever we're doing, but we begin to carry inside that inner serenity of silence. So the transcendent is known by many names. I mean, I refer to it as pure consciousness, the transcendent, the self. But in other traditions, they may refer to it as samadhi or the Tao, being, oneness, peace of God that passes all understanding. There are many, many different names for the same thing. And we can all experience the transcendent. In fact, there are wonderful examples of poets or musicians or just anybody having experiences of transcending without meditating, without being in a state of prayer or anything of that sort. And just those moments when the mind seems to expand to universal mind. We're no longer just our own individual self. We feel unbounded, connected with everything. We experience that state of pure consciousness, which underlies everything. And then when we come back from there, it's enormously refreshing. And as far as happiness is concerned, I think that I can quote here from the Bhagavad Gita. Probably your readers will be familiar with that. And one of the verses states, without peace, there cannot be happiness. So by experiencing the deep silence of the transcendent, then we begin to experience that deep peace within ourselves. And because we experience that, then we're not so challenged by all the storms outside. You must think that, you must do that. These people believe that, these people believe that. We become what we're really meant to be. And we understand ourselves better. We carry within that inner serenity, and we're just not knocked around so much by all the storms pushing us this way and that way, and all the things that make the relative world can be very interesting and can be very challenging.
Yes. In fact, part 3 of your book, Cultivating Happiness, outlines peace as the basis of happiness.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one thing that sets Transcendental Meditation apart. Now, having said that, I should just explain that Transcendental Meditation allows us to experience the transcendent in a very easy, very effortless way. I think that any meditation or any level of prayer that can take us to that level where we experience the transcendent very easily, very effortlessly, will probably have the same effect. But at the moment, as things stand at the moment, all the research that's been done on transcendental meditation in this field indicates that it's the only meditation technique so far that has been shown to reduce crime rate in the population, even reduce war deaths, fatalities. So there is that difference. And I think in a way it's very simple to understand. When we meditate, we have an effect on our surroundings. We can't help but have an effect. Even on the very superficial level, if I meditate and I experience a lot of silence, I experience the transcendent while I'm meditating, and I come back and I'm carrying that greater serenity within me, then I can affect my immediate surroundings. It's like sitting on a train and you have a group of people who are being a bit uncomfortable in their behavior, they're singing or shouting or whatever. And then I've had the experience where I've started to meditate and then it's all settled down around me. And I'm sure that, you and other people have had that same experience. So even on that level, we affect those that we come into contact with in a positive way, but at a deeper level, because pure consciousness, the transcendent, it's omnipresent. It's a field of a state of consciousness that pervades, if you like, the whole of creation. It gives rise to the whole of creation. And because we experience that, it's rather like dropping a stone in a pond. You drop a stone in the pond and all the ripples just wave out.
Yeah.
So
Radiate out, yes.
absolutely. And that's why we're affecting the very basis of life itself, again, in a positive direction towards greater peace, greater happiness, greater positivity. That's the way it works. And there've been now, I think, more than that now, actually, because even I think a week or so ago, a new study was actually published on this phenomenon in, I think it was the World Journal of Social Science or something like that. Almost the past 40 to 50 years, there's been demonstration after demonstration of this phenomenon. And the research has been published in peer-reviewed journals. So scientists do know about it, but as yet, there's not enough interest in it. They come up with all sorts of excuses like it's a coincidence or it's just something that one cannot explain and all that sort of thing. But I think it's very difficult to use the coincidence excuse because it might happen once or twice and one might say, oh, it's coincidence. But when it happens 20, 30, 40 times, it seems rational to think that it's gone beyond coincidence. There's something there. I mean, even if half the claims for the phenomenon were shown to be true, then it's an extraordinary phenomenon that needs to be examined properly.
Yes. Now, perhaps this is the basic question. I know it's a basic question. So when you talk about transcendence and transcendental, can you give a definition of what that means in this context? I don't want to take too much of your time, but I would like to ask you a few simple favors. First of all, please rate, review, and share this podcast wherever you're listening. It sounds like a simple little thing, and it is, but it has a huge impact for us because it helps other people find us in the podcasting algorithms. I don't know how it works, but I do know that it helps a lot. Next, if you would subscribe or follow wherever you're listening, whether that's YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you're listening, just hit subscribe or follow, and that helps you and it helps us. It helps you because then you receive notifications when we have a new episode that's out. It helps us because, again, algorithm magic, I don't know what happens, but it helps. And then finally, you can support our podcast in a tangible way by going to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast and then click on support the show. Now, we have a new feature too. We are now on Patreon. You can find us on Patreon. You can also find the link to Patreon when you go to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast. So on Patreon for $3 a month or $5 a month, you can support your metaphysical and spiritual growth. You can learn about upcoming guests and you can get early and ad-free versions of the shows. So please support us. This podcast is free for you to listen, but we have costs and quite frankly, they come out of my pocket. So if you like this content, if you get a lot out of it, please see what you can do to give back. Thank you so much.
Yes, I mean, Transcending, if I start from here, transcending is a word that means go beyond. He transcended his own emotions and behaved in a certain way. The transcendent is another way of talking about pure consciousness, being, samadhi, the Tao, all those terms I've already used. That is the transcendent. That's a state of being that exists beneath the relative world. It underlies everything, and we experience it in our quietest moments. I suppose in the Christian tradition, it's that still voice of calm that we can experience in very quiet moments. When we meditate, it's a vast reservoir of peace, bliss, creativity, and intelligence. It's something that isn't talked enough about, basically. It should be part of education in schools. I mean, that's my own personal view. And I would certainly always advocate for that. And I know that certainly in South America and in parts of the United States, transcendental meditation has been introduced into school systems, and the students have benefited enormously from it. Grade points have gone up, levels of unruly behavior have gone down, all this. So even if I'm the only person talking about it, I will keep talking about it because I think it's terribly important, especially now. We switch on the news and see unruly behavior, a society going in a direction that isn't making people happy. It is a fact, actually, that the latest report from the World Happiness Report shows that young people in the United States are less happy than they were 2 years ago. And then they were not very happy either. So it's pretty much a downward spiral at the moment. And America itself is no longer listed among the 20 most happy countries in the world. So something is not working and something new needs to come in to redress the balance.
And so I do have to ask though, so when you're talking about the studies as in, I think it was South Africa, you said that transcendental meditation reduces negative behaviors, increases it's specifically transcendental meditation and other form and not doesn't spill over to other forms of meditation such as mindfulness or metta?
Right. It's a very good point, actually. All I can say is at the moment, transcendental meditation is the only form of meditation where there's peer reviewed, published research in very respected journals, including the Journal of Conflict Resolution from Yale University, for instance, that indicates that when large numbers of people practice transcendental meditation and the advanced transcendental meditation programs as well in a group, there starts to be a decrease. Well, let's say there starts to be an increase in orderly behavior, a decrease in the crime rate, and so on. But as I think I started to say earlier, it may be that transcendental meditation is the pioneer leading the way, and more research will find that other forms of meditation, providing that they do allow the meditator to experience pure consciousness, then they should have the same effect, to be frank.
Hey, this is fascinating. And surely you've heard of Lynn McTaggart and her experiments, the world meditation experiments that she does, and trying to target specific issues, specific places in the world. So, of course, meditation can affect these outcomes. So, we definitely need more of this. Now, why do you think that there has been such a recent reduction? And I saw it was specifically among young people in North America. Why is that this has happened?
Yes, it's actually extremely interesting point, I think, to make. I think there are a number of reasons. I would put some of it down to the growth of and the promotion of materialism that's taking place, not just in the US, it's taking place across the world. And young people are growing up with the idea that we live in a material universe, that if there is a spiritual side, it's very insignificant. We don't really need to think about that. And there probably isn't a spiritual side. They're growing up in a world where things don't seem to matter. There doesn't seem to be meaning in life or purpose in life. And in fact, the only thing that there seems to be is some kind of idea that since there's no ultimate purpose in life and in creation, the only purpose is something that we impose on life. And the problem with that is that when we pass on, then all that we've achieved and our creativity and our beliefs and everything, they just fade away with us. So I think that's one reason. It's the growth of materialism, which is creating a completely false impression of what life is all about. So that's one thing. I can only go by research when I talk about these things. I mean, there is research that shows that social media, for instance, can have a depressing effect on young people. I mean, obviously, there are great things about social media. It's easy to keep in touch with people, to keep in touch with what's going on in the world and all that. But somehow it's a very isolating, very alienating process. And young people can talk about having 200 friends and followers on Twitter, which is now X, of course. But what does that really mean? Where is the personal contact? The day-to-day, just casual conversation. Hi, how are you? How's the weather? Are you walking? Can I join you? All of this. So there is that. And also, I have to say that a lot of, I think, news reporting, which reports on the negative, always the negative, it contributes to people feeling, oh, this is too much. I can't cope with this. And, just reading, I think the news, certainly the mainstream media, for lengths of time is very depressing, I think.
It is very depressing. And another question I have is that this transcendental meditation, how long has it been around? And well, there's many questions from this. Why don't more people know about it? And what did we do before that to maintain peace, serenity, and happiness? So yeah, if you want to answer any or all of those.
It's a great question. It's a very broad question too.
Yes. Yeah.
Transcendental meditation was brought to the West in the early 60s. And it came first to the United States and then it spread to the rest of the world. And now there are over 10 million people who've learned it. So it has been around for a long time and there's been a steady flow of people who've wanted to learn it. I think that it is becoming more popular now, funnily enough, especially through the David Lynch Foundation. I mean, David Lynch, of course, is the film director, former.
Yes.
Yes. And he started the David Lynch Foundation, which is basically to introduce transcendental meditation, not just to the world, but also to certain sections in the world. For instance, veterans. I mean, we all know that vets come back from their tours in violent hotspots, Iraq and wherever. They can suffer from terrible PTS, post-traumatic stress, and it can lead to substance abuse. It can lead to depression, anxiety, terrible nightmares, for instance, and even suicide in the worst cases. I mean, there are a lot of suicides. So one focus of the David Lynch Foundation has been to introduce veterans to transcendental meditation with very good results. So that's one side of things, and also to first responders and also to healers of different sorts. Who will heal the healers, I think is the title. There are different groups that have been targeted. I always feel is the wrong word to use. The focus has been on different groups that really need it. I mean, people in the health profession, first responders, veterans. These are people who see the absolute worst of life and they need help. They need tremendous help. And this is where transcendental meditation can help. I mean, I'm sure there are other things that help as well. I mean, I know there are. But transcendental meditation is one more thing that can help people to be able to cope with very, very difficult circumstances.
Now, help people cope mentally, but surely there are physical benefits to transcendental meditation.
Absolutely. Yes, there are. I was just trying to think where to begin. I mean, there's been so much research, over 400 research studies done on probably the past 20 years or so. But they can be reduced, I think, to a few things. First of all, transcendental meditation helps to activate the body's relaxation response because of that very deep rest we get. And that reduces stress and anxiety. I mean, that's the first thing. Probably I think the first thing that people would associate it with. And they might even think it's the first thing that everybody needs to know about. Because we suffer from stress all the time. I mean, whether it's just normal stress of day-to-day functioning that we can handle. But when stress builds up in the physiology, then it becomes a danger, and it can at some time maybe burst out into arguments, even violent arguments. It can burst out into conflict, from individual conflict to societal conflict. So I think it will be true to say that most instances of violence, conflict, stress-related instances stem from stress at their source, stress of some kind at their source. Stress is really the enemy of happiness in a way. Some people think that having a certain amount of stress makes one more alert and more ambitious and so on. I'm not sure that's true, because stress, it seems to me, is always the block that prevents us from being able to achieve our heart's desire, whatever it is we want. And anyway, stress is one major factor. And of course, sorry, were you going to say something?
If we can reduce stress in the body, we reduce blood pressure, we improve digestion, we improve sleep, which improves so much else, including mental health. That stress is creating, we hear about oxidative stress and the effects on the body. So if we can just reduce that, we have.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, stress, it's not something to be happy about. We should be very concerned about levels of stress in ourselves, in our communities, in society, in the world as a whole. I mean, I think at the moment the world needs something to calm it down, calm it right down, because the conflicts that are going on, I mean, both internationally and nationally, you can't solve a conflict really on the level of a conflict. You've done this. No, I didn't. You said that. No, I didn't, and so on and so on. Conflicts have to be solved at a much deeper level, and they have to be solved on the transcendental level, basically. They have to be solved on the level that underlies the violence, that underlies the conflict. We reduce the stress in world consciousness. We reduce the stress in national consciousness. And immediately people can start to think more clearly. It's like there's a huge fog in the world. And people are groping around in the dark, trying to find something that enables them to find a solution. Well, it's very hard to find a solution in a thick fog. One needs to remove the fog, have mental clarity on the individual level and societal clarity as well, clear thinking from leaders and from people in the public eye in society. And then we'll find the solutions then. The solutions will come much more easily. And I think we'll see a lessening of tension and conflict in the world and in our own lives, in our own families.
I think so too. This is so needed. And perhaps, one of the biggest factors as to why the happiness index in the United States has gone down, because we have so much strife, so much conflict, so much disagreements, and not seeing eye to eye on very fundamental things. So I think that is a very important point. So there are so many benefits to this. Now, if somebody was wanting to begin a TM program, I don't know, how would somebody get started?
Yeah, it's another good question, actually. I think the first thing to do would be to go to the website, tm.org. That's TM, just the initials, tm.org. And that will give a very clear view of what Transcendental Meditation is. It'll give the course structure. It'll be able to tell you, it has a list of everywhere where there's a Transcendental Meditation Center in the US. So people can find their nearest center, they can talk to a teacher, they can get their questions answered, and then just proceed from there. So I think that website, tm.org, is probably the place to start. So that's what I would certainly recommend to begin with.
Yes, looking at this now, it really is a very valuable resource. Speaking of websites, I've been looking for yours and I don't see it. Do you have a website?
I'm in the process of putting up a website and starting my own YouTube channel as well. I just started that process. I'm a bit behind the curve there, actually. But yeah, so I will get that. I will get a website up.
Your book is all over the internet.
Is it?
Yeah, it's all over. Yes, on all of the independent, from what I could see, over all of the independent bookstores, Amazon, of course, Walmart, of course, Barnes and Noble, of course, but literally wherever you can find a book, your book is. Is there an audio version of it, to your knowledge?
That needs to be produced actually as soon as possible. The book actually isn't published until I think it's the first week of August.
Ah,
Um,
yes.
then it's available. I mean, people can obviously pre-order it in advance if they want to, but I don't think it reaches anywhere until first week of August. And as I say,
Yes.
I've been so busy writing, I've even got plans for another book and so on. I haven't actually got round to creating a website, and I know I have to do that. So,
There are people who could do that for you too.
yes, there are. I know.
You do have another book out, though. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, the first book I wrote with another author, Barry Spivak, and it was An Antidote to Violence, Evaluating the Evidence. And again, that went into great detail about the things we've been talking on this program. It starts off by looking at individual consciousness and collective consciousness, which I haven't really mentioned yet, and then looks at a phenomenon known as the Maharishi effect, which is when large numbers of people practice transcendental meditation and the more advanced City program, that's when there starts to be a really big effect on the population of that around that group or around those meditators. I think it was first seen in actually 1974, just somebody who happened to be looking up statistics on something or other discovered that in cities where there was somewhere around 1% of the population practicing transcendental meditation, then the crime rate was going down. And that sparked off a whole series of research and publications and so on. I just wish that the scientific community would really get into this, really study this, because if it is true, and I think it is, if it's true, then how can we possibly ignore it? The idea that, deep meditation can reduce crime, can improve the quality of life generally in a city, in a town, in a country. I don't see much that's more important than that.
Right. Well, and this was a question I had for you, and you answered it intuitively, I think, that how many people would need to be meditating together to see these results on a larger scale? And you said 1%?
Well, I mean, the 1% figure was felt to be a rough guideline. It wasn't felt to be an absolute figure. But it's like boiling water. Water boils at a particular temperature. So as soon as we reach the kind of a particular number with people practicing transcendental meditation, and as I say, the more advanced City program, then there starts to be a reduction in the crime rate. I mean, the most recent publication, actually, I think I started to mention it earlier. I think it was published a month ago, 2 months ago, something like that, was a 41-year research project in Peru. And the more that it was actually young people were learning the Transcendental Meditation Program, the more that happened, then the more there appeared to be a beneficial effect on the quality of life in Peru. And Peru is now a much happier country than it was before that study began. And one can draw other inferences as well. I mean, there may be other things going on that contribute to this. But I think that given the previous research on the effect, the impact of transcendental meditation on the collective consciousness of a nation, then I think it will have played its part, because it's what's happened almost every time there's been evidence of a large group of people practicing transcendental meditation. There's been some kind of improvement in the quality of life. So it helps, let's put it that way. And it helps in a positive way.
Absolutely. If nothing else, than to reduce stress, which can lead to increased happiness, which is
Yes.
wonderful. The whole point of your book. Now, I do have another question. There are so many books out there on meditation. There are not as many books on happiness, but there are some. So why did you choose to write this particular book?
Yes, another very good question. Somebody asked me that yesterday, and I took a while to think about it. Somehow there was something in me that felt impelled to write it. I could have written about anything, but thoughts about happiness, what makes people happy? Why are people unhappy? I mean, we all know how people felt during lockdown. There was a more tendency towards becoming very inward and less evidence of happiness, basically. And I think that was the final spur that made me decide to write the book. Yeah, I want people to be happy. If you're something yourself, if you're feeling very peaceful, you want everybody else to be peaceful around you. You want them to share in the joy that that brings. And the same thing with me. All the years I've been meditating, I felt a growth of happiness, little bubbles of bliss that come up sometimes for no reason at all. I want other people to share in that. I don't want it to be just me. I want to feel the whole world, if you like, that can be included in that greater serenity, that greater happiness that comes with that. So it was just that. And I think there's no specific reason. I didn't sit down one day and think, oh, what shall I write about? It just came naturally to me to do this. I wanted to know about happiness. I wanted to know about unhappiness. And I wanted to know how we could turn that round. So that's really was the impetus for the book.
Well, and I like how you have the book organized as well. Part one is understanding happiness, just getting a baseline for what happiness is and what is not, understanding consciousness, how that works, how one person's calm and peaceful mind actually does radiate out to general consciousness, I think is perhaps the point. And then part three being peace and how that is the basis of happiness. So I can't wait to sit down and read the entire book. I've just kind of skimmed through it. So I can't wait to look and see all of the research and all of what all went into this is very interesting. Also, Vedic traditions, the traditions of different types of meditation and how Transcendental got started. So very fascinating stuff. You've really done your research, of course, being a professor of consciousness studies helps. And then you had mentioned another book forthcoming, perhaps. What would that be about?
Yes, now it's going to be very different. I have it in mind to write a book about consciousness itself and how consciousness can become the material world. And I want to illustrate it in different ways, actually, not just with sort of intellectual discussion, but even with poetry. And, it's been going through my mind. I mean, rather like this book somehow percolated in my mind a long time before I actually wrote it. This topic is also percolating in my mind. And I would like to see if I can do that because it's a very abstract topic and it's not something whereby I can offer scientific research. I mean, how does consciousness become matter? But I can offer insights from traditional wisdom, the speeches and writings of indigenous people in different parts of the world, traditional wisdom of humanity, also personal experience, my experience, the personal experience of other people, other traditions. I'd like to know what other traditions have to say about this. This is what I have in mind. So I think once this book gets going and I can take my attention off it, then I'll start I'll start writing that book.
Wonderful. Well, in the meantime, we can get your book basically wherever fine books are sold, as they say. And is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with? Anything we haven't discussed or I haven't asked?
You've asked a lot of wonderful questions, actually, and it's been great. I don't know. I think maybe happiness is our birthright. It's something we all aspire to. We feel we have a right to it, and we do have a right to it. We have a right to be happy. And the only things that are holding us back, I think, are stress levels and maybe just the feeling that is happiness so important? Well, I think it is because my own view is that the purpose of life is the expansion of a very real, deep happiness that comes from experiencing higher states of consciousness. And I think that's what I would like to leave your audience with.
Wonderful. I think that is a wonderful reminder. So thank you so much, Patricia, for joining me today. It has been a pleasure. And when you have that next book, please reach out. I'd love to have you back.
I certainly will. Thank you, Christy. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Don't know what to watch next? Decisions. Well, we've got some suggestions. You can click this little video here and watch that. It's something that we think you're going to like. If you like the last one, you're going to like that one too. You can also click on the subscribe button. And if you do that, then you'll get notifications whenever we have a new video up. Win-win, right?